Grace Turner grew up in Harmony, Kansas, a small town where the flat fields stretched endlessly under a wide sky. At 23, she lived in a weathered house with her father, Tom, a mechanic whose hands were stained with grease from years of fixing cars. Her mother had passed away when Grace was just a child, leaving behind an old camera that Grace clung to like a lifeline. She loved photography, capturing the quiet beauty of Harmony in soft golden light. But life had other plans. The pandemic hit hard and the garage where Tom worked shut down, leaving him jobless. Bills piled up and the bank loomed over them with a debt of $50,000, threatening to take their home. Grace worked part-time at the local general store, ringing up groceries for neighbors she'd known her whole life, but the pay barely covered food, let alone the crushing loan payments. Every night, she'd sit on the porch, staring at her mother's camera, dreaming of a way out. Across the country, in Charlotte, North Carolina, Ethan Cole paced the sleek office of Cole Creative, a rising advertising firm he'd built from scratch. At 28, he was sharp and driven, with dark hair and a gaze that could silence a room. He'd started the company in a cramped apartment 5 years ago, pouring every ounce of himself into it. Now, it was on the cusp of something big, but trouble brewed. A major client, a national retail chain, had doubts about Ethan's youth and single status, questioning if he could handle their multi-million-dollar campaign. They wanted stability, a leader with roots, not a bachelor who might burn out. Ethan scoffed at the idea, but their ultimatum hung heavy: prove he was reliable, or they'd walk away. Losing them could sink his company, and he wasn't about to let that happen. One humid evening in Harmony, Grace scrolled through her phone, exhaustion tugging at her eyes. An odd email popped up from an unknown sender, offering a chance too strange to ignore. It read, "Participate in a 6-month fake marriage challenge. Stay committed and earn $60,000. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. The money could wipe out her father's debt, save their house, give them breathing room. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the reply button, but the thought of Tom losing everything pushed her forward. She signed up, agreeing to a virtual marriage with a stranger. They gave her a fake name, Alex, and told her she'd never meet her husband. A day later, in Charlotte, Ethan got the same email. He laughed at first, tossing his phone aside, but the client's threat echoed in his mind. A fake marriage could be his ticket to looking stable, a quick fix to keep them on board. He signed up too, taking the name Jordan, figuring it was just a game. The process was fast. Grace sat in her bedroom, the old camera on her desk, and joined a video call with the screen blurred. A voice on the other end, calm and formal, walked her through vows she didn't mean. Ethan did the same from his penthouse, rolling his eyes as he repeated the words. They were married, legally bound for 6 months, but strangers still. A few texts followed, awkward and brief. "You okay with this?" he typed as Jordan. "Yeah, you?" she replied as Alex. "Need the cash," he wrote. "Me too," she answered. That was it, their only connection, a thread of words between two desperate souls. Neither knew the other's face, voice, or story, but the deal was done. Grace got an advance payment, enough to stall the bank, and Ethan sent a screenshot of his marriage certificate to his client's liaison, buying himself time. With the money easing her fears, Grace made a choice. She couldn't keep scraping by in Harmony. Her photos, the ones she'd spent years perfecting, deserved more than a dusty shelf. She packed a bag, hugged Tom goodbye, and boarded a bus to Charlotte. She'd heard of Cole Creative, a company that turned images into stories, and they were hiring photography interns. It was a long shot, a small-town girl with no degree, chasing a city dream, but she had to try. The ride was long, the road blurring past her window, and she clutched her mother's camera, whispering to herself that this was her chance. In Charlotte, Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the city skyline. His client had backed off for now, impressed by his commitment, but he felt restless. He didn't know why he kept checking his phone, reading those short texts from Alex, a stranger who somehow felt familiar. Grace arrived in Charlotte as dusk settled over the city, its glass towers gleaming against the horizon. She found a cheap motel room, the kind with flickering lights and thin walls, and spent the night editing her portfolio. The next morning, she stood outside Cole Creative, her stomach in knots. The building was all sharp lines and polished steel, a world away from Harmony's dirt roads. She adjusted her faded jacket, took a deep breath, and walked inside, her application clutched tight. Ethan, meanwhile, sat in a meeting, barely listening as his team discussed the intern candidates. He didn't usually care about hires this low on the ladder, but something told him to stay. He glanced at the stack of resumes, oblivious that one of them belonged to the woman he'd married days ago. What neither of them knew was the truth behind the challenge. It wasn't just a random scam or a quirky service. It was a secret project funded by Richard Cole, Ethan's estranged father. A man who'd walked out when Ethan was a kid. Richard, now a wealthy recluse, had designed this experiment to test something he'd lost faith in. Love born from struggle. He'd picked Grace and Ethan from thousands of applicants, pairing them for reasons he kept hidden, watching from afar as their lives began to tangle. Grace stepped into the lobby, her shoes scuffing the marble floor, and Ethan flipped through papers upstairs, both unaware that fate, or a father's meddling, had already set them on a collision course. In Harmony, Tom sat alone, staring at the foreclosure notice Grace had pushed aside. He trusted her, his quiet, fierce daughter, but he worried she'd break herself trying to save him. In Charlotte, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Alex. Made it to the city, nervous. He typed back as Jordan, "You'll be fine. Good luck." He didn't know why he cared, but her words stuck with him, a faint echo of something he couldn't name. Grace looked up at the towering office, her heart racing. She was here to fight for a job, for her father, for herself, and Ethan, restless in his glass-walled kingdom, had no idea the woman about to walk into his world was already closer to him than anyone else. Grace Turner stood in the lobby of Cole Creative, her palms sweaty against the folder of photographs she'd spent years perfecting. The space hummed with energy, employees in crisp suits and polished shoes weaving past her. She felt small in her faded jacket and worn jeans, a speck of Harmony dust in Charlotte's gleaming world. She'd made it to the city, but now came the hard part, convincing someone to give her a chance. She approached the reception desk, where a young woman with a tight smile glanced up. "Here for the internship?" the woman asked, eyeing Grace's outfit with a flicker of judgment. Grace nodded, handing over her application. "Wait over there," the receptionist said, pointing to a row of chairs. Grace sat, clutching her mother's old camera, her heart pounding as she watched the clock tick toward her interview. Upstairs, Ethan Cole leaned against a conference table, arms crossed as his team debated budgets and deadlines. He wasn't supposed to be here for intern interviews, but his director of human resources had a conflict, and Ethan hated leaving things to chance. He'd built Cole Creative from nothing, and every hire mattered. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from Alex, the stranger he'd married in that bizarre online challenge. "I just got to Charlotte," it read, "trying to find a job, so nervous." He smirked, typing back as Jordan, "You'll do fine. Nerves mean you care." He sent it off, surprised at how easy it felt to talk to her, even if she was just a name on a screen. He slipped the phone away, focusing on the stack of resumes. Grace Turner's name sat near the bottom, a small-town girl with no formal training. He barely glanced at it. Grace's name was called, and she stood, smoothing her jacket as she followed an assistant down a hall lined with framed ads. The interview room was a glass box, bright and cold, with 3 people waiting inside. Natalie Hayes, Ethan's cousin and head of marketing, sat at the center, her sharp eyes scanning Grace before she even spoke. 2 other managers flanked her, but when Ethan walked in at the last second, Grace froze. She'd seen his photo on the company website. The CEO himself, all intensity and quiet power. He nodded at her, taking a seat in the corner, and she forced herself to breathe. "Grace Turner, right?" Natalie said, her voice clipped. "Tell us why you're here." Grace opened her folder, sliding out photos of Harmony's golden fields and weathered barns. "I've been taking pictures since I was a kid," she began, her voice shaky but growing steadier. "I want to tell stories with them. like the ones you tell here. Natalie barely looked at the photos before cutting in. These are nice for a scrapbook, but we're not selling postcards. What makes you think rural shots work for a national campaign? Grace's cheeks burned, but she met Natalie's gaze. Because people connect to what's real, she said. These aren't just fields. They're home to someone. I think your clients could feel that too. The managers exchanged glances, one scribbling a note, but Natalie smirked. Sweet, but naive. We'll see. Ethan stayed silent, his fingers tapping the table as he watched Grace. Something in her words, her quiet defiance, stuck with him. He leaned forward. Why Charlotte? He asked, his voice low. Grace swallowed. Because I need a shot at something bigger. My family's counting on me. Ethan nodded, and against Natalie's pursed lips, he said, Give her a week. Trial run. Grace blinked, stunned, as Natalie rolled her eyes, but didn't argue. That night, Grace collapsed onto her motel bed, her mind spinning. She'd done it somehow, but the looks from Natalie and the others lingered like a bruise. She pulled out her phone, texting Jordan. I got through the interview, but everyone there hates me already. Ethan, sprawled on his penthouse couch, saw the message and grinned. They'll come around, he typed as Jordan. They always hate the new kid at first. Keep going, Grace smiled at the words, a tiny spark of warmth in the cold city. She replied, Thanks, makes me feel less alone. Ethan read it, pausing. He didn't know why her messages hit him like this, but he liked it. He wrote back, Same here, then set the phone down, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, Grace started at Cole Creative, her trial week hanging over her like a deadline. She was given a small desk in a buzzing open office, surrounded by people who barely glanced her way. Natalie dropped a stack of papers on her desk. Organize these client briefs, then shadow a shoot this afternoon. Don't mess it up, she said, walking off before Grace could respond. Grace nodded, diving into the work, her fingers itching to hold her camera instead. Hours later, she joined a team photographing a jewelry ad. The lead photographer barked orders and Grace stayed quiet, snapping a few test shots when no one was looking. She caught a glimmer of light on a necklace, a soft angle no one else saw, and saved it to her memory card. Ethan walked through the studio on his way to a meeting, his mind on the client, still watching his every move. He paused, noticing Grace crouched near a light stand, her focus intense as she adjusted her lens. One of the assistants bumped into her, muttering, Watch it, newbie, and Grace stumbled, catching herself. Ethan stepped forward without thinking, picking up a lens cap she'd dropped. Careful, he said, handing it to her. Their fingers brushed, and Grace looked up, startled by his nearness. Thanks, she murmured, her voice barely audible over the studio noise. He nodded, holding her gaze a second too long before moving on. Natalie watched from across the room, her jaw tightening. She didn't like how Ethan lingered, how he seemed drawn to this nobody from nowhere. Grace uploaded her test shots that night, reviewing them on a cracked laptop screen. One stood out, the necklace glowing against a dark backdrop, simple but striking. She hesitated, then emailed it to the project lead, hoping it wasn't a mistake. The next day, the lead called her over. This yours? He asked, pointing to the image on his monitor. Grace nodded, bracing for criticism. It's good, he said. We're using it as a backup. Keep it up. Grace beamed, a flicker of pride cutting through her doubt. She texted Jordan, Something I did got noticed today. Maybe I belong here. Ethan, sipping coffee in his office, saw the message and smiled. Told you, he replied. You're better than you think. He didn't know the shot she'd taken was already on his desk, part of a report he'd skimmed through later. What Ethan didn't realize was that he'd seen Grace's work before. Weeks ago, in one of those early texts from Alex, she'd sent a blurry photo of a Kansas sunset, a casual share when he'd asked what she did for fun. He'd saved it, struck by the way the light bent over the horizon, though he never told her. Now, as Grace settled into Cole Creative, that same light flickered in her shots, a quiet signature he couldn't place. She adjusted to the city's rhythm, her motel room a temporary home, while Ethan navigated his own pressures, their lives brushing closer with every passing day. Natalie's suspicion grew, and whispers started among the staff. but Grace kept her head down, unaware of the eyes on her, or the man behind Jordan's words, who was already starting to care. Grace Turner settled into her trial week at Cole Creative, her small desk a fortress of client briefs and camera gear in the chaotic Charlotte office. She worked late most nights, her eyes burning from staring at screens, but every finished task felt like a step toward proving herself. The other employees kept their distance, their whispers sharp as they passed her. Natalie Hayes, Ethan's cousin and marketing head, made no effort to hide her disdain. She'd drop impossible deadlines on Grace's desk with a smirk, saying things like, "Try not to screw this up, Harmony girl." Grace bit her tongue, nodding silently, her hands trembling as she sorted files. She wanted to snap back, but she couldn't risk losing this chance. At night, she'd text Jordan, the stranger from her fake marriage challenge, pouring out her frustration. "Work's killing me," she wrote one evening, curled up on her motel bed. "I don't know if I can keep up." His reply came fast. "You're tougher than they are. Don't quit now." She smiled, his words a lifeline in the dark. Ethan Cole moved through his days at Cole Creative with a restless edge, his mind split between the big client and the odd comfort he found in Alex's texts. He'd check his phone between meetings, her messages a quiet break from the pressure. "My days are a mess, too," he typed one night as Jordan sprawled across his penthouse sofa. "This client's driving me insane," she wrote back. "At least we're both suffering, makes it less lonely." He chuckled, surprised at how much he looked forward to her replies. Downstairs, Grace was proving her worth, her test shots catching the team's eye, but Ethan barely noticed her in the office bustle. He was too busy keeping the retail chain happy, their demands growing louder. They wanted more than a fake marriage certificate now. They wanted proof he could deliver under stress. Trouble brewed when Sophia Lane walked into Cole Creative one crisp morning, her heels clicking like a warning. A renowned photographer with a portfolio of glossy magazine covers, she'd worked with Ethan years ago, back when his company was just a startup. They'd been friends once, maybe more, but she'd left for bigger gigs. Now, she breezed into his office unannounced, her smile tight. "Heard you're hiring interns," she said, tossing a leather bag onto his desk. "Waste time on amateurs when you could have me." Ethan leaned back, wary. "We're fine, Sophia. The team's solid." She laughed, sharp and cold. "Solid? That little country mouse I saw downstairs." "She's your intern?" Ethan frowned, realizing she meant Grace. "She's good," he said. "Give her a chance." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "You're slipping, Ethan. I'll fix that." Grace felt Sophia's presence before she saw her. The office buzzed with her arrival, staff fawning over the famous photographer. Grace kept her head down, editing a batch of photos, but Sophia spotted her across the room. "You're the new girl?" she asked, voice dripping with mock curiosity as she leaned over Grace's desk. Grace nodded, offering a polite smile. "Those your shots?" Sophia pointed at the screen, then snorted. "Cute, but they scream small town. Ethan deserves better." Grace's stomach twisted, but she stayed quiet, her fingers gripping her mouse. Sophia sauntered off, leaving a trail of unease. That night, Grace texted Jordan, "Someone new at work hates me too. I'm drowning." Ethan, sipping a beer in his kitchen, read it and typed, "Ignore them. They're jealous. You've got this." He didn't know he was comforting the same woman Sophia had just dismissed. Sophia didn't stop at words. She started whispering to the staff, planting seeds of doubt about Grace. "She's only here because Ethan's soft on her," she'd say, loud enough for Grace to overhear. The rumors spread fast, assistants shooting Grace sidelong glances, her every move judged. She pushed through, focusing on her work, but the weight grew heavier. One afternoon she lingered in the break room, refilling her coffee, when she caught Sophia and Natalie talking in hushed tones. "He's risking the client for her," Sophia said, her voice low. "I've got proof he's not serious about this company. Faked some papers to look stable." Natalie grinned. "Good. She's a liability. Let's get her out." Grace froze, coffee spilling over her hand, and slipped away before they saw her. She didn't know what papers meant, but her gut churned. She texted Jordan, "Something's wrong at work. I heard stuff I shouldn't have." Ethan replied, "What kind? Be careful." She didn't answer, too shaken to explain. Ethan sensed the shift in his company. the tension rippling through the team. He trusted Natalie, but Sophia's return unnerved him. She'd always been ambitious, cutting corners to win, and he didn't like her hovering. To clear his head, he handed Grace a small project, a personal favor outside the client chaos. "Shoot some stills for my pitch deck," he told her one morning, dropping a brief on her desk, something real, not flashy. Grace nodded, grateful for the trust, and threw herself into it. She stayed late that night, the office emptying out as she framed shots of everyday objects, a coffee mug, a cracked chair, turning the mundane into art. Exhaustion hit hard, and she slumped over her desk, falling asleep with her camera cradled in her arms. Ethan worked late too, his office light the last one burning. He wandered downstairs to grab a file and found Grace, her cheek pressed against a stack of prints, soft breaths stirring the air. He stopped, struck by the sight. Her photos lay scattered around her, each one glowing with a warmth he couldn't shake. One caught his eye, a close-up of the mug, light spilling over its edge in a way that felt familiar. He reached for his phone, pulling up that old text from Alex, the blurry Kansas sunset she'd sent weeks ago. The light matched, the same golden thread running through both. His pulse quickened. It couldn't be her, could it? He shook his head, dismissing the thought, and grabbed a jacket from a chair, draping it over her shoulders. She stirred but didn't wake, and he stepped back, his mind racing. Grace woke hours later, the jacket slipping off her as she blinked at the dark office. She didn't know who'd left it, but its warmth lingered on her skin. She gathered her photos, emailing them to Ethan with a short note. "Hope these work." The next morning, he opened the file, staring at the images. They were perfect, raw and honest, exactly what he'd asked for. He called her up to his office, a rare smile breaking through. "These are great," he said, pointing at the screen. "You've got something special." Grace blushed, stammering a thank you, her heart lifting. Natalie walked in mid-conversation, her expression souring at the praise. "Nice work," she said, her tone flat, and left without another word. Grace didn't see the look Natalie shot Sophia later, a silent agreement forming between them. The challenge tying Grace and Ethan together tightened its grip. That afternoon, an email from the mysterious service landed in both their inboxes. 3 months left, quit now and you lose everything. Stay and the reward grows. Grace read it in her motel room, her stomach sinking. $60,000 was her father's lifeline, but the rumors, the pressure, made her waver. She texted Jordan, "Do you ever feel trapped by this deal?" Ethan, in his penthouse, saw the message and paused. "Sometimes," he replied, "but it's keeping me afloat. You?" She wrote back, "Same. Can't back out now." He stared at the screen, a strange ache settling in his chest. He didn't know why her words mattered so much, or why her photos felt like echoes of Alex's sunset. Sophia's whispers grew louder, her jealousy sharpening into a blade. She cornered Grace in the studio one day, flipping through her latest shots. "You think you're special because Ethan likes these," she asked, her voice venomous. "He's just humoring you. I've seen him build this place. He needs real talent, not charity cases." Grace clenched her fists, her voice steadied despite the sting. "I'm here to work, not to impress you," Sophia laughed, walking away. But her words burrowed deep. Grace sat alone that night, staring at her camera, doubt creeping in. She texted Jordan, "I don't know if I'm good enough." Ethan, restless in his office, read it and typed, "You are. Don't let them win." He didn't know he was fighting her battles with her, their lives tangling tighter in a web neither could see. Grace Turner's trial week at Cole Creative turned into a grueling test of will, her days a blur of tight deadlines and sharper scrutiny. Natalie Hayes and Sophia Lane watched her every move, waiting for a slip. The big retail clients campaign loomed, and Ethan Cole had pushed for Grace to join the photography team, trusting her eye over the protests of his cousin. Natalie piled on extra work, her voice cold as she handed Grace a list of revisions late one Friday. "Fix these by Monday, or you're out," she said, leaving Grace alone in the studio. Grace rubbed her eyes, exhaustion seeping into her bones, but she stayed, tweaking shots until the city outside faded to black. She texted Jordan, her lifeline in the chaos. "Work's a nightmare again. I'm barely holding on." Ethan, across town in his penthouse, saw the message and replied as Jordan, "You're stronger than this. Keep fighting." Grace smiled faintly, his words pulling her through another sleepless night. Monday brought a storm. Natalie and Sophia had sabotaged Grace's gear over the weekend, loosening a lens and scratching her camera's memory card. Grace arrived early, setting up for the client shoot, and froze when her equipment failed. The necklace she'd framed so carefully the week before wouldn't focus, the shots blurring into useless streaks. Panic clawed at her chest as the team gathered. Natalie, smirking from the sidelines, "Looks like the intern's choking," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Sophia crossed her arms, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Grace scrambled, her hands shaking, until Ethan walked in, his presence cutting through the chatter. "What's the holdup?" he asked, his tone sharp. Grace stammered, "My camera's broken. I don't know how." He studied her for a moment, then pulled his own camera from a bag. "Use mine," he said, handing it over. "Get it done." Grace took the camera, its weight steadying her nerves. She adjusted the settings, blocking out Natalie's glare and Sophia's whispers, and shot the necklace again. The light caught just right, the image crisp and alive. She handed the memory card to the lead photographer, who nodded after a quick check. "These work," he said, uploading them to the client folder. Ethan watched from the back, his jaw tight but his eyes soft with something Grace couldn't name. The shoot wrapped, and the team dispersed, leaving Grace to catch her breath. Natalie stormed off, furious, while Sophia lingered, her gaze locked on Ethan. Grace texted Jordan that night, her motel room dim and quiet. "I pulled it off today, but it feels like a fluke. Everyone's lying around me." Ethan read it in his office, the city skyline glittering beyond his window. "It's not a fluke," he typed as Jordan. "You're the real deal. Want to meet tomorrow? I need to tell you something." Grace hesitated, then replied, "Okay. Park near work? Noon?" The next day, Grace sat on a bench in a small Charlotte park, her mother's camera resting in her lap. She'd brought it for luck, her fingers tracing its worn edges as she waited for Jordan. She didn't know what to expect, only that his texts had kept her sane through the mess of the last month. Ethan left Cole Creative at noon, his steps quick as he headed to the park. He'd wrestled with the idea all night, that Grace might be Alex, the woman he'd grown to lean on through their strange deal. Her photos, her words, they lined up too perfectly. He spotted her from across the path, her brown hair catching the sunlight, and stopped short. She held a camera, the same kind Alex had described in a late-night text about her mother's old gear. His breath caught. "Grace?" he called, stepping closer. She looked up, confused. "Ethan? What are you doing here?" He sat beside her, his voice low. "Are you Alex?" Grace stared, her mind racing. "Jordan?" she whispered, and he nodded, a half-smile breaking through. "Yeah, it's me." She laughed, a shaky sound, and clutched her camera tighter. "You're my boss? The guy I've been texting?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, sheepish. "I didn't know until yesterday. Your photos, that sunset you sent me, they match. I joined the challenge to keep a client off my back. I never thought it'd be you." Grace's eyes widened, then softened. "I did it for my dad. He's drowning in debt. I needed the money." They sat in silence, the truth sinking in, until Ethan spoke again. "These past weeks, talking to you, it's the only thing that's felt real. I don't want it to be fake anymore, Grace." She looked away, her heart pounding. "I don't either, but I need time. This is too much." Their moment shattered when Sophia's plan hit. She'd followed Ethan, her phone ready, and snapped a photo of them on the bench, close and unguarded. By afternoon, she'd emailed it to the retail client with a note. "Your staple CEO's playing games with an intern. This marriage is a sham." The client called Ethan within hours, their voice icy over the line. "What's this picture? We don't work with liars, Cole. Explain or we're done." Ethan stood in his office, staring at the emailed image, fury boiling under his calm exterior. He called Grace up, showing her the screen. "Sophia did this," he said. "She's trying to ruin us." Grace paled, guilt flooding her. "Because of me?" I shouldn't have come here. Ethan shook his head. No, she's jealous. You're better than she'll ever be. I'll fix this. Ethan stormed downstairs, confronting Sophia in the studio. What's your game? He demanded, holding up his phone. She shrugged, unfazed. You're throwing away everything we built for her. I'm saving you. He clenched his fists. You're out. Leave. Now. Sophia smirked, grabbing her bag. You'll regret this when the client walks. She sent the photo to a local gossip blog as a parting shot, the headline hitting online by evening. Cole Creative CEO caught in fake marriage scandal. Ethan's phone lit up with alerts, his team scrambling to contain the fallout. Grace saw it on her motel laptop, her stomach dropping. She texted Jordan, forgetting for a moment it was Ethan. Everything's falling apart. I'm sorry. He replied instantly. Not your fault. We'll get through this. Meet me tomorrow? Grace barely slept, the scandal's weight crushing her. She didn't know how deep the challenge ran or who'd paired her with Ethan. The truth was uglier than either of them guessed. Richard Cole, Ethan's father, had watched it all unfold from a distance. He'd left Ethan's mother years ago, bitter and broken, and built a fortune in silence. The marriage challenge was his creation, a twisted experiment to see if struggle could forge something real. He'd chosen Grace for her grit, Ethan for his stubborn pride, and funded it through a shell company, tracking their texts, their lives. He sat in a dimly lit office miles away, reading Sophia's blog post, a faint smile on his lips. His son was in chaos, but he saw the spark he'd hoped for, the one he'd lost long ago. Ethan paced his penthouse, the city a blur outside. He'd lost control of the narrative, the client teetering on the edge of leaving, but Grace's face kept flashing in his mind, her voice, her photos, her quiet strength. He didn't care about the money anymore or the deal. He cared about her. Grace sat in her motel, staring at her camera, the scandal's echo loud in her ears. She'd come to Charlotte for her father, but now she was tied to Ethan in ways she couldn't untangle. They'd meet tomorrow, face the wreckage together, but the shadow of Richard's game loomed, a secret neither could see, pulling them toward a reckoning they weren't ready for. Ethan Cole stood in his office at Cole Creative, the Charlotte skyline a gray haze beyond the glass. The scandal Sophia Lane had unleashed burned through the local blogs, the photo of him and Grace Turner on that park bench now a weapon in the hands of their doubters. The retail client called again, their tone sharp over the speakerphone. We don't trust you, Cole. This fake marriage stunt proves you're unreliable. Fix it by end of day or we're gone. Ethan gripped the edge of his desk, his voice steady despite the chaos. Give me a chance to explain. Meet me in person, 2 hours. They agreed, reluctantly, and hung up. He texted Grace, who'd gone silent since the news broke. Need you at the office. We're fighting this together. She replied after a long pause. Okay, on my way. Grace sat in her motel room, the cracked laptop screen glowing with the blog post. Her chest ached, guilt twisting her insides. She'd come to Charlotte to save her father, not to ruin Ethan's company. The photo Sophia snapped made her look like a schemer, a small-town girl chasing the CEO. She packed her camera, her hands unsteady, and took a bus back to Cole Creative. The lobby felt colder now, eyes following her as she stepped inside. Ethan met her at the elevator, his face tense but his voice soft. You didn't cause this, he said, guiding her upstairs. Sophia's out of line. I'll handle it. Grace nodded, unsure, her trust in him warring with the mess around them. He showed her the client email, Sophia's accusation glaring in black and white. They're coming here, he said. I need you with me. The meeting room filled fast, the client reps in stiff suits across from Ethan and Grace. Natalie Hayes lingered in the corner, her arms crossed, silent for once. Ethan stood, his presence commanding despite the storm. Yes, I joined a marriage challenge, he began, his voice firm. It was a dumb move to look stable for you, but Grace isn't a game. She's the best thing that's happened to this company. He gestured to a screen, pulling up her photos from the necklace shoot. These saved your campaign when we were sinking. She's not an intern to me, she's the real deal. Grace's breath caught, her eyes on the images she'd fought to capture. The lead client, a woman with gray streaks in her hair, leaned forward. Pretty words, Cole. Prove she's not a prop. Grace stood, her voice shaky but clear. I'm not here for him. I'm here for my work. Those shots, they're mine. Judge me on that. The room went quiet, the client studying Grace's photos, then her face. Ethan handed over a folder, her portfolio from Harmony mixed with her recent work. She's the reason I'm still in this, he said. The woman flipped through, her expression softening. Fine, she said at last. The campaign stays. But no more stunts, Cole. They left, the tension draining from the air, and Ethan turned to Grace, a faint smile breaking through. You did it, he said. She shook her head. We did it. Natalie slipped out, her silence loud with defeat, but Grace felt the victory hollow. She pulled Ethan aside. I can't stay if it's like this. People think I'm using you, he frowned, searching her eyes. Then let me fix that, too. Sophia's scandal hit harder outside the office. The blog post spread, comments piling up, calling Ethan a fraud and Grace a gold digger. She avoided the studio, hiding in her motel, until an unexpected knock shook her from her daze. Ethan stood there, rain dripping from his jacket, his face raw with urgency. I'm not losing you over this, he said, stepping inside. I don't care about the company, the client, any of it. I care about you. Grace stared, her throat tight. Ethan, I'm scared. This isn't what I came for. He took her hands, his grip warm. I know. I didn't come for this either, but those texts, your photos. You're in my head, Grace. I love you. She pulled back, tears welling. I love you too, but it's too fast. I don't know if it's real. The door swung open again, cutting through their words. Richard Cole stepped in, his silver hair damp, his cane tapping the floor. Grace froze, confused. But Ethan's face darkened. Dad, what are you doing here? Richard's voice was gruff, unapologetic. I made the challenge, picked you both. Watched you stumble into this. Ethan stepped forward, anger flashing. You set us up? Why? Richard sighed, leaning on his cane. Because I left you and your mom with nothing but regrets. I wanted you to find something I couldn't. Love through the hard stuff. He looked at Grace. I saw your application, your fight for your dad. I knew you'd push him. Grace blinked, stunned. You've been watching us? Richard nodded. And you're better than I hoped. Ethan's fists clenched, but Grace touched his arm, steadying him. He's right about one thing, she said softly. We've found each other. Richard pulled a folder from his coat, handing it to Ethan. The challenge ends in a week. Stay in, and there's more money. Walk away, and you're free. Your call. He left, the door clicking shut, leaving them in silence. Ethan tossed the folder aside, his eyes on Grace. I don't need his cash. I need you to stay. Not for this, but for us. Grace wiped her eyes, her voice breaking. I want to. I've been running on empty since Harmony. You're the first thing that feels full. She stepped closer, and he pulled her into his arms, their lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of rain and relief. The scandal faded, a distant noise against the quiet they'd carved out. Outside, Sophia's victory soured. The blog post backfired, readers turning on her for spite, and Cole Creative's campaign launched to praise Grace's photos at its heart. Natalie retreated, her influence waning, while Ethan and Grace faced the fallout side by side. Richard watched from afar, his experiment a success he'd never claim. Grace's motel room became a memory as Ethan drove her back to his place, the city lights a promise beyond the windshield. They'd finish the challenge, not for the money, but for the truth they'd stumbled into. Grace rested her head on his shoulder, her camera in her lap, and whispered, We're okay now, right? Ethan squeezed her hand. Yeah, we're more than okay. The final twist waited, buried in Richard's folder. If they stayed together past the 6 months, a hidden clause promised $100,000 more, a secret reward for choosing love over convenience. They didn't know it yet, their focus on each other, not the game. Grace thought of her father, safe from debt, and Ethan of the company he'd fought to keep. They'd face the fire, the lies, the doubt, and come out stronger. The rain slowed outside, and they held on. Two strangers turned soulmates, ready for whatever came next. Grace Turner woke to the soft hum of Charlotte morning traffic, sunlight spilling through Ethan Cole's penthouse windows. A week had passed since the chaos, the scandal fading as Cole Creative's campaigns soared, her photos lighting up billboards across the city. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet quiet on the hardwood, and found Ethan in the kitchen pouring coffee. He smiled, handing her a mug, and she took it, warmth spreading through her hands. They'd finished the marriage challenge, the 6 months ticking down to a quiet close. But they'd stayed together, not for the payout, not for Richard's game, but for each other. Grace's father, Tom, was free of debt now, the $60,000 a lifeline she'd fought for. And Ethan's company stood stronger, the client won over by their grit. They drove to Harmony that weekend, the Kansas field stretching gold under a wide sky. Tom waited on the porch, his face softer than Grace had seen in years. He hugged her tight, then shook Ethan's hand, a gruff nod of approval. "You're good for her," he said, and Ethan grinned, pulling Grace close. Back in Charlotte, Grace moved out of the motel, her things finding a home in Ethan's space. She took a full-time role at Cole Creative, her camera a constant companion, her shots shaping every new project. Ethan softened too, his edges smoothed by her laugh, his office less a fortress and more a shared haven. One evening they stood on his balcony, the city twinkling below. Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a sleek new camera, her name etched on the side. "You captured me with that old one," he said, his voice low. "Thought I'd give you something to keep doing it." Grace's eyes welled, her fingers tracing the engraving. "You didn't have to," she said, but he shook his head. "I wanted to. You're my focus now." She kissed him, slow and sure, the past a shadow they'd outrun. From Harmony's dust to Charlotte's lights, they'd built something real, a love born from struggle, sealed by choice, and framed in every shot they'd take together.